Welcome, dear listener, wherever you are, settled under the covers, curled into the quiet rhythm of night, or simply seeking peace from the hum of a long day. Allow yourself to drift gently into another time. Tonight we set sail, not in pursuit of treasure or glory, but through the lived reality of those who truly sailed the high seas. Centuries ago, far from the golden myths of pirate maps or romantic adventures, this journey takes us into the creaking, swaying, damp-bellied world of wooden ships, when the horizon was both hope and hardship. We're casting off into the 16th century, an age when the oceans were vast, unmapped realms of mystery, when death and disease waited beneath the waves, and in the very barrels of food meant to sustain life. This is the tale of the forgotten sailors, their cramped hammocks, their biscuit-filled bellies, and the salt-crusted monotony of months at sea. The age of exploration might gleam with names like Magellan and Drake, but it was built on the backs of men who rarely saw home again. Men who drifted with the tides, unsure if land or life would ever return. Close your eyes if you like. Let the soft lap of historical memory rock you gently as we begin. In the lowest quarters of the ship, imagine yourself below deck. The wood is dark and slick with moisture, not quite wet, not quite dry. Every breath you take is thick with the scent of tar, mildew, old rope and sweat, sharp and constant. The air never moves here, trapped below the waterline, where sunlight is only a memory. The boards above you groan with every wave, every step of boots higher up. You feel the sway of the ship more keenly here, in the belly of the beast. This is where the common sailor sleeps, eats, and waits. Your bed is a hammock slung tightly between two beams. When the ship rolls in a storm, and it always does, the hammock sways with it, sometimes gently, sometimes not. There's no real privacy. The sailor next to you might snore, or cry, or murmur in his sleep. You get used to the sounds of others, the closeness of it, the smell of it all. Everyone stinks. There is no bathing. There is only the sea, and salt and skin that never quite feels clean again. Meals are rituals of survival, not satisfaction. You're handed your portion, usually salted beef or pork, so tough you must soak it in water before chewing. Not that the water is fresh. It's been sitting in barrels for weeks. It tastes tired, sometimes sour. Your biscuit is called hardtack, a name that suits it. Baked until it's like stone. It lasts for months because no living thing wants it, except perhaps the weevils, tiny bugs that burrow into the biscuit's dry mass. But they're not a surprise. You learn to tap the biscuit sharply to knock them out. Or you don't. Hunger makes you indifferent. A spoonful of peas if you're lucky. A few stringy dried fish, and once a week, a small allowance of beer or watered wine. The alcohol staves off the worst of the rot. Still, scurvy waits. You don't know it by name, not yet. But your gums begin to swell, teeth loosen, legs ache with a deep, unshakable fatigue. Purple spots bloom beneath the skin, and there's bleeding where there shouldn't be. Some of the older sailors seem to know what's happening, but not what causes it. Citrus fruit could cure it, but citrus is rare, expensive, and perishable. You press on. Everyone does until someone simply doesn't get out of their hammock anymore. Toilets, of a sort. A simple wooden bucket lashed to the deck or tucked behind a screen. If the sea is calm, you might go to the rear of the ship, to the head, a plank over the water. But in bad weather, that's a dangerous luxury. Many have slipped, never to return. So the bucket it is, emptied when possible, or not. The smell becomes just another part of life. And what of the work? You rise with the bell or before it. Day and night blur at sea. The sun, the moon, the stars. They are your clock. Your tasks are constant. Hauling ropes, scrubbing decks with salt and sand, repairing sails, climbing rigging slick with sea spray. Your hands develop permanent blisters, calluses, and cuts that never seem to fully heal. And yet, you persist. You have to. There's no quitting a voyage. Some sailors talk to the sea, others to themselves. Superstition floats through the ship like fog. A sudden storm might mean the anger of a spirit. A bird following the ship could be a soul. Whistling is forbidden. It's said to call the wind. A woman aboard. Bad luck. A black cat. Maybe good or bad. Depends who you ask. The line between belief and survival is thin and often blurred by hunger and fear. When night comes, if it isn't tea already, there is little to do but lie back in your damp hammock, listen to the creak of the timbers, the distant crash of waves, and hope tomorrow is the same. Not better, not worse, just the same. Because the worst thing that can happen on a voyage, change might mean a storm, or the captain announcing landfall. That turns into shipwreck, or the food running out, or a man going mad and throwing himself overboard. Stability, monotony, routine. That's the close. And so, the sailor sleeps, if he can, if the ship allows it, if the rats don't scurry over him in the night, if the memories of home don't claw at the inside of his mind. The rhythm of his life is the rhythm of the ship. Groan, creak, sway, splash, over and over, until it becomes a lullaby of hardship, a floating world, damp and dim, drifting forever toward a horizon that never seems to come. Now, let the wind shift just a little. Let us drift slowly toward a particular story. Perhaps one you've heard, though rarely told quite like this. It begins in 1519, when 5 ships, wooden and creaking with the weight of ambition, slipped away from the Spanish coast and into the Atlantic. Their leader was Ferdinand Magellan, determined, calculating, and quiet. He sailed not as a Spaniard, though his mission bore the Spanish crown, but as a Portuguese man fallen out of favor with his native land. Magellan believed the world could be circled. Others believed too, but no one had done it. Not fully, not westward across the wide Pacific, not with so many unknowns. To us now it feels like a certainty, but to the sailors aboard those ships, it was like sailing to the edge of a dream, with no promise of waking. 5 ships: Trinidad, the flagship, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, and Santiago, each vessel small by modern standards, uncomfortable, crowded. They creaked under the strain of supplies, casks of wine, barrels of salt meat, ropes, charts, and guns. 270 men began the voyage. Fewer than 20 would return. From the very beginning, the voyage was uneasy. The men were restless. Magellan, ever private, kept the true course close to his chest. There were whispers, rumors of deceit. Some claimed he was taking them to their doom. Others murmured about Portuguese allegiances. In truth, many sailors did not trust him. They feared him, admired him, but they did not trust him. And as the ships drifted down along the coast of South America, time began to unravel them. Supplies began to thin. Storms rocked the fleet. The land they sought, a strait through the bottom of the continent, remained hidden behind endless cliffs and wind-swept beaches. They waited, anchoring in a cold, desolate place now called Patagonia. Here, the real unraveling began. The winter was harsh, cold enough to numb fingers to rope. Long nights, little fresh food. Tensions flared. A mutiny bloomed in the dark. 3 of the 5 ships turned against Magellan. Captains arrested. Alliances formed. Quiet plans hatched under oil lamps and whispered in damp corners. But Magellan responded not with fury, but precision. He moved swiftly, executed one captain, spared others, marooned a man, left alone on the barren shore, with only the sea and silence as companions. History never heard from him again. Order was restored, for a time. Eventually, the elusive strait was found. Narrow, winding, dangerous. Cold winds screamed through the channels, but it opened like a secret door onto a vast, endless ocean. The Pacific. Magellan called it peaceful. That peace was a lie. Weeks passed, then months. The Pacific was larger than they imagined. Their maps had lied by omission, by ignorance. No land, no harbors, just blue upon blue. The sails hung heavy. The men grew quiet. The food ran out. They ate sawdust, leather, rats, anything. Magellan wrote that they boiled the leather bindings of ropes just to chew. Water grew foul. Scurvy bloomed. Gums turned black. Men died with lips crusted in salt and thirst. Still, Magellan sailed onward. Eventually land a series of islands, now known as the Philippines. But here, fate grew impatient. The locals welcomed them at first. Trade was offered, friendship too. But alliances are fragile when language and custom stand between. Magellan, bold, perhaps too bold, took sides in a local conflict. He waded ashore into battle, perhaps believing in armor or faith or luck. But none of those things mattered. He died there, on the beach, not with a roar, but with the sand wet beneath him and his dreams of glory unfinished. He would never complete the circle he began. The men who survived were fewer now, weary, hollow-eyed, but they sailed on. One ship, the Victoria, would return to Spain in 1522, scarred, limping, the hold filled not with gold, but with spices, enough to declare success, enough for kings and merchants to smile. But of the 270 men, only 18 stepped off the ship. The rest remained scattered, dead at sea, in distant graves, or simply vanished into the pages of time. Still, Magellan's voyage had proved what many doubted, that the Earth was vast, connected, and able to be circled. But it came at a cost not measured in miles, but in lives. Imagine being one of those final men, staring at the land after years afloat, the ground unmoving beneath your feet, the silence of solid earth, the air sweet, strange, and free of salt. You had touched the edge of the world and returned, but you were no longer the same. Now, let us drift again, not forward through history, but sideways, into the mist. The sea, after all, does not always return what it takes. For every sailor who returned home to kiss the ground, there were dozens who simply disappeared. Not in dramatic thunderclaps or storms with names, but in quiet endings, forgotten somewhere between 2 points on a chart. The age of exploration left behind more than journals and maps. It left behind wrecks, skeletons of ships lying beneath the waves, fragments of wood swallowed whole by coral and sand, and it left behind stories, some true, others half remembered or born entirely from the imaginations of those waiting for ships that never arrived. Imagine the horizon, endless and blue, a ship gliding steadily, sails full, its crew unaware that just beneath the surface, just beneath the illusion of calm, waits a reef sharp enough to tear open a hull like parchment. Shipwrecks were common. In fact, they were expected. Navigation was not precise. Charts were riddled with errors. Latitude could be measured roughly with tools like the astrolabe. But longitude, that was a mystery until the late 18th century. For centuries, sailors quite literally did not know exactly where they were. So, they guessed. And sometimes they guessed wrong. One of the most haunting stories is that of the São João, a Portuguese carrack that sank off the coast of South Africa in 1552. Caught in a storm, its massive wooden body was thrown against the rocks. Over 500 passengers and crew. Few survived. Those who did wandered inland, attempting to return to Portuguese territory. Their trek became a legend of hunger, heat, and slow loss. Most never made it. The wreck itself was swallowed by the sea, its cargo of spices and silks never seen again. Then there's the strange case of the Batavia, a Dutch East India Company ship that struck a reef in 1629 off the coast of modern-day Australia. The wreck itself was only the beginning. Survivors gathered on a barren island, but salvation turned quickly to horror. Without law, a mutiny formed. A man named Geronimus Cornelis took control, and what followed was not simply about starvation or thirst. It became a tale of cruelty, of those who preyed upon their fellow castaways. But even here, we tread gently. The past was not kind, and while violence lurks beneath the surface of many shipwreck tales, we need not descend fully into the darkness. Instead, let's look toward something quieter and stranger. Let us consider ghost ships. They were part of sailor folklore, and sometimes part of reality. Imagine a merchant vessel spotted drifting, sails flapping gently. No signals, no signs of life. Another ship approaches, boards it, but no one is there. The decks are empty. The food is still laid out. The logs stop mid-sentence. One of the most famous examples is the Mary Celeste, found adrift in 1872. Though technically after the age of exploration, it echoed the same mysteries. Her crew gone. No signs of struggle. No bodies. No final note. The ship was intact. Supplied. Still seaworthy. To this day, no one truly knows what happened. But such stories were not unique. In the centuries before, merchant ships, war galleons, and even privateers were sometimes found abandoned at sea, their names unknown, their timbers drifting across oceans, slowly dismantled by waves and time. Superstitions bloomed around these sightings. Sailors, vulnerable to the unknown, whispered of curses and omens. A ship without a crew was a terrible sight, because it forced them to consider that the sea could erase a person without a sound. Some believed ghost ships were messages, warnings. Others believed they were trapped between worlds, doomed to wander. There was even the story of the Flying Dutchman, a vessel cursed to sail forever, its crew never touching land again. Sightings of it became a sailor's bad omen, especially near the Cape of Good Hope, where rough seas and shipwrecks were common. Of course, we know now that many such stories can be explained. Rogue waves, pirates, disease, accidents. But on those long voyages, where the sea stretched in all directions and nights were dark and quiet, mystery thrived. Even today, remnants of old ships occasionally rise from beneath the sand after a storm. Bits of iron, fragments of timbers, a cannon buried in silt, a whisper from a time when the ocean was unknowable and full of secrets. So next time you think of the age of exploration, Imagine not just the brave captains and bustling ports, but the thousands of ships that slipped beneath the waves and never returned. The sea, vast and forgetful, holds them still. Let us rise now gently from the silent wrecks resting beneath the waves and return to the living deck of a ship in full sail. But not just any part of the ship. We ascend to a place above the common crew, above the rank smell of buckets and biscuits, to the quarterdeck where boots are polished, voices are measured, and the view, clear in all directions, is both literal and symbolic. Here, among the timbers polished by salt and authority, sat the officers, the navigators, the men whose decisions shaped not only the voyage, but the fate of every soul on board. And at the heart of their world was the admiral's table. Now, do not picture luxury as we know it. These were still ships, still built of wood and canvas, buffeted by storm and creaking under their own weight. But by comparison to the dark, damp decks below, this was a world apart. Imagine a small but solid table bolted to the floor of the great cabin, covered not in fine cloth, but in a linen runner. Candles set into brass holders flicker steadily, casting long shadows over the charts that spill across the surface. The admiral, calm, composed, sits at the head, a logbook open before him. Silver utensils rest neatly by his plate. Wine, carefully rationed, is poured into a glass no common sailor would ever touch. The officers around him eat from pewter dishes, not wooden trenchers. Their portions are larger, their meats less salted, and their bread often, miraculously, still soft, while the sailors chewed on hardtack crawling with weevils. The officers dined on items preserved with care. Dried fruit, cheese, and brined olives, if they were lucky. Sometimes even smoked fish, pickled onions, or nuts from the homeland. And yes, there was wine, red and thick, brought in barrels, sometimes watered down to stretch the supply, sometimes spiced to mask the beginnings of spoilage. The admiral's cabin, often located at the stern, was the most stable place aboard. It swayed less, and its windows, small but precious, offered glimpses of sky and wake. Here, the air was cleaner, the talk quieter. Yet even here, comfort was relative. The ship rocked, mice skittered, water leaked through boards, and always the knowledge pressed in from the horizon. Storms, decisions, hunger, and the morale of hundreds who lived below. But here, over salt beef sliced thinner, and tobacco passed in slow turns, officers tried to maintain decorum. They discussed charts, debated wind, recounted letters from home, some old and folded thin, others reread until the ink blurred. Sometimes music floated through the cabin, a fiddle brought aboard, a low hum of a remembered hymn, or silence, sweet, golden silence. For at sea, stillness was a treasure more precious than coin. The admiral himself was often a man caught between two worlds. He bore the expectations of the crown, the weight of command, and the fears of failure. Every mutiny, every lost mast, every inch of drift off course, his burden. And so, his table was not merely a place for food, but for strategy, reflection, and above all, control. Below, the crew shared salted rations and gnawed on bones. But above, at the table in the great cabin, life ticked at a slower, more measured pace. It was a ritual, knives scraping gently on tin, spoons clinking in bowls, a toast raised, not in celebration, but in endurance. To the wind, to the voyage, to safe return. It is worth noting that the Admiral-S meals were not simply indulgence. They were also a tool of hierarchy. Food signified order, a clean table, a full glass, a composed demeanor. These were reminders of civilization in the face of the raw, untamed ocean. And as night fell, and lanterns swayed softly in the motion of the sea, the admiral would retire, perhaps to his logbook or to a letter he might never send. His cot, larger than the sailors but still narrow and stiff, creaked as he lay down, one ear always half listening to the ship's rhythm. Above him, canvas strained in the wind. Below, water lapped against wood, and somewhere out there, the stars turned overhead. The admiral's table, like the ship itself, floated through both space and time, a wooden island of decisions and dignity, cast upon an endless sea. And so, our ship returns slowly to shore. Not a place, exactly, but a feeling, a stillness, a safe harbor in the mind. We've wandered the creaking decks of history tonight, stepping into the worn boots of sailors who braved an ocean not yet understood. We've heard the scrape of spoons in the dark, the rustle of canvas, sails overhead, and the gentle clink of glass in the admiral's cabin. We've drifted past ghost ships and lost fleets, met men whose names echo faintly through time, and tasted salt on every wind. Their lives were not easy. They were far from romantic. They were often cold, hungry, seasick, and afraid. But still, they sailed. Some for glory, some for duty, many simply because they had no choice. And through them, the world grew smaller, then wider, then closer than ever imagined. If you are still awake, let your thoughts gently anchor here, on the vast, endless sea. A place of hardship, yes, but also rhythm. A place where time was marked by bells, the stars guided your way, and every breath of wind carried both risk and hope. And if your eyes have already closed, then let them rest easy. For now there are no waves, no rope to coil, no watch to keep, only the quiet hum of history, whispering like the tide beneath your dreams. Thank you for drifting through time with us tonight, aboard this floating piece of the past. Until next time, sleep well and travel gently.